On the banks of the Wu River, a lone man stands. Fire surrounds him, so do the cries of war. He could have escaped, but he didn't. 3.5 centuries later, another war god kneels. One chose death, one begged for life. Neither was truly defeated in battle. Both stood at the absolute peak of human warfare. Yet both lost everything. The real question isn't, who was stronger? The real question is, why do the strongest warriors always die the most powerless deaths? 207 BC Julia. A battle was about to decide the fate of the Qin Empire. The Qin army, 400,000 men. Almost no one believed they could lose. Xiang Yu had only 90,000. The numbers told everyone. The Chu army had no chance. Any general would wait for reinforcements, would keep a path to retreat. But Xiang Yu made one of the most radical decisions in history. He ordered every cooking pot destroyed, every boat burned. In that moment, the Sioux soldiers understood. There would be no road home, no supplies, no retreat, no second chance. There was only forward. Later, history recorded one sentence. Xiang Yu broke the cauldrons, burned the boats. The Sioux army shattered the Qin forces again and again. From that day on, people believed war itself had a name, Xiang Yu. 3.5 centuries later, war would take another name. His name was Liu Bang, and in his age, almost no one wanted to face him head-on. Before the camp gate, two armies were moving toward an unavoidable clash. Later accounts say Liu Bang proposed something almost impossible. Not negotiation, not intimidation. A single arrow. If he struck the halberd branch, the armies would stand down. If he missed, blood would follow. Every eye fixed on that tiny glint of metal. It was too far. Almost too far to be called a target. Liu Bang said nothing. He simply raised the bow. This arrow was not meant to kill. It was meant to stop a war. The moment the arrow left the string, the entire battlefield seemed to stop breathing. Then, a sharp ring of metal. The halberd branch was struck. In that moment, they understood. If one man could do this, then war itself had to question its own meaning. Their tragedy did not begin with defeat. It began with the first misjudgment. Xiang Yu's first great error happened at a banquet. At Hongmen, everyone understood. Liu Bang was right in front of him. This was not an ordinary rival. This was the man who would one day take the empire. Fan Zheng saw it. Again and again, he signaled, "Kill him." But Xiang Yu did not move, not because he was afraid, because he disdained it. In Xiang Yu's world, a true strong man did not win through conspiracy. He believed that if power was great enough, the rules would move aside. But history does not reward purity. History rewards effectiveness. What Xiang Yu let go was not a man. It was a future empire. Liu Bang's first error was not letting an enemy escape. It was killing the men who protected him. Ding Yuan had been his superior, his first layer of protection. But Liu Bang killed him, and in return, received a higher place. Then came Dong Zhuo, a greater patron, and a far more dangerous master. Dong Zhuo gave Liu Bang power, and with it, a second chance to betray. The records may describe it as character, but history remembers it as a system failure. In an age of chaos, violence could bring a man close to power, but trust kept him there. Liu Bu believed the strong did not need loyalty, only options. But a man with too many options does not gain allies. He gains suspicion. Xiang Yu's problem was that he trusted his direct power too much. Liu Bu's problem was that he trusted his individual value too much. One spared his future enemy, the other killed his past protectors. On the surface, these were two very different mistakes. But at the core, they failed in the same place. Neither understood what truly holds power together. Not fear, trust. Xiang Yu made his enemies believe he could be maneuvered. Liu Bu made his allies believe he could change sides at any moment. So both could still win battles. But they began to lose the world. This was the first curse of the war god. The stronger a man becomes, the easier it is to believe the world runs on strength alone. But they had not collapsed yet, because the age itself was only beginning to change. They believed that if they won the war, the world would return to something they understood. But they did not realize they were not losing to one enemy, they were losing to an age. What Xiang Yu faced was not merely the Chu-Han struggle, it was a systemic upgrade. Qin had already proven something. The realm could run not on noble blood, but on officials, roads, laws, and granaries.
But Xiang Yu tried to take the world backward, back to feudal division, back to nobles, back to oaths between heroes. He defeated Qin, but he did not inherit the thing that made Qin terrifying. What was terrifying was not merely the Qin army, it was the Qin system. Xiang Yu knew how to destroy armies, but he did not know how to manage a world. So his victory, from the very beginning, carried the shadow of an older world. Liu Bang seemed weaker, but he understood the new world better. Liu Bang did not need to be the strongest man. He only needed the strongest men to serve a system. This was the change Xiang Yu could not see. Victory in war no longer belonged to one man's bravery. It began to belong to organization, to supplies, to whoever could make more people believe in tomorrow. Xiang Yu was still the sharpest blade of the old world, but the age had begun building a new machine, and the world Liu Bu faced was changing even more brutally. By the late Eastern Han, no matter how strong one man was, he could not hold a city alone. He needed supplies, officials, discipline. He needed people to believe following him was not a temporary gamble. But what Liu Bu truly had was almost only himself. He could defeat an enemy general, he could terrify an army, but he could not make a regime run by itself. This was the difference between Liu Bu and Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu had an old system, but chose the wrong direction. Liu Bu did not even have a system. He had only combat power. So every time he won, he had to prove himself again. But a regime cannot survive by constantly proving itself. It needs default trust. A strong man can make people obey for a moment, but a system makes them obey for years. Xiang Yu did not understand centralization. Liu Bu did not understand organized war. They were warriors, but the world was becoming a web. In such a world, the brighter individual valor became, the more dangerous it was. Because everyone begins to ask the same question. If he falls, what remains? If Liu Bang fell, there was Xiao He, there was Zhang Liang, there was Han Xin, there was an imperial machine taking shape. If Xiang Yu fell, the world would lose Xiang Yu. Nothing more. If Cao Cao fell, there were military farms, there were officials, there were laws. If Liu Bu fell, Xiapi was only a lonely city filled with people unsure whom to trust. So this age no longer asked who was the bravest. It began to ask, who could leave behind structure? They were warriors, but the world no longer belonged to warriors. And when warriors cannot understand their age, collapse does not arrive suddenly. It begins piece by piece. Collapse is never sudden. It only becomes visible suddenly. For Xiang Yu, the first line to break was named Han Xin. Han Xin did not simply betray Xiang Yu. More precisely, he had never truly been used by him. A man who could change the course of war could not find a place inside Xiang Yu's system. Liu Bang gave him a place, and sometimes a place matters more than loyalty. Then Peng Yue began cutting Xiang Yu's supply lines, not through open battle, but by making victory more expensive. Xiang Yu could shatter armies, but he could not protect every road that fed them. Then came Ying Bu, a former ally who began recalculating the future. This was not simple betrayal, it was judgment. They began to judge that Xiang Yu could not build the future. The most dangerous moment for a leader is not when enemies grow stronger. It is when allies begin to doubt. Soldiers feel it too. They may not understand strategy, but they understand the smell of victory or defeat. When they realize even the strongest general cannot bring tomorrow, they begin to leave. Desertion is not the beginning of collapse, it is the result of trust already ending. Xiang Yu was still winning, but every victory made him more alone. The same collapse was happening around Liu Bu, only smaller and more ironic. Inside Xiapi, Liu Bu was still powerful, but his power no longer made people feel safe. An organization held together by personal intimidation does not fear armies most, it fears internal loosening. Ho Cheng, Song Xian, Wei Shu, these were not the strongest names, but they became the names that decided the ending. Later storytelling often compresses this collapse into one detail: a bottle of wine. The terrifying thing was not the wine. It was that a regime could be pierced by something so small. If a system is stable, small things remain small. But if trust has already broken, small things become openings. Liu Bu could make enemies afraid, but he could not make his own men feel safe. This is what a trust system looks like when it collapses. Not everyone rebels at once. Everyone simply begins preparing an exit. Around Xiang Yu, allies left. Soldiers drifted away. Around Liu Bu, the gates still stood. The soldiers still stood. But loyalty no longer did. A powerful individual creates the easiest illusion. As long as I remain, everything remains. But if everything depends on one man, then that man becomes everyone's risk. Kong Yu's problem was that the future refused to follow him. Liu Bu's problem was that the men around him no longer wanted to share his risk. And so, collapse accelerated, not because the enemy suddenly became brilliant, but because the inside finally admitted there was no future. At this point, Xiang Yu could still kill, still break through, still inspire fear. But fear cannot replace belief, and it cannot replace hope. At this point, Liu Bu could still shoot, still charge, still make enemies afraid to approach. But a city does not become loyal just because enemies are afraid. Xiang Yu lost the confidence of the realm. Liu Bu lost the confidence of the men beside him. These losses looked different, but the result was the same. Both men began becoming men with only themselves left. So real collapse is not a blade-piercing armor. It is confidence leaving the body. When people stop believing you can lead them into the future, all your past victories begin to lose weight. Collapse is not sudden, it is cumulative, and their real problem was only beginning to surface. War can push a man to the center of power, but war cannot teach him how to rule. Xiang Yu's greatest problem was not weakness. It was mistaking conquering the realm for possessing it. When he entered Xianyang, he saw Qin's wealth, Qin's palaces, Qin's hatred. But he did not truly see Qin's most terrifying inheritance. Not the palaces, the imperial machine. Traditional memory remembers the fire. But what mattered more was that he did not take over the system. He could destroy Qin, but he did not turn Qin's tools into his own. Then he began dividing the realm among kings, as if taking an empire and breaking it back into the old world. He believed an empire could be distributed, but an empire can only be built. Liu Bang seemed slower, more compromising, even humbler. But he was collecting people and collecting systems. Xiang Yu was a blade. Liu Bang was a web. A blade can cut down enemies. A web can hold a world. So Xiang Yu's failure was not that he could not win. It was that, after winning, he did not know what came next. Lu Bu's problem was even more direct. He rarely even reached the stage of state building. He occupied Suzhou, then withdrew to Xiapi. It looked like territory. In reality, it was temporary ground. The things a regime needs, he lacked: stable supplies, reliable officials, sustainable allies. Lu Bu believed that as long as he remained terrifying, others would continue to obey. But fear is a short-term currency. It is spent quickly and devalued even faster. What extends rule is not making people fear you. It is making them believe you will still be there tomorrow. The granaries will still open. The rules will still count. Lu Bu did not offer that tomorrow. What he offered was only the next battle. So each victory he won felt less like building a future and more like delaying defeat. Xiang Yu tried to build a kingly order. Lu Bu had no order at all, only deterrence. But they shared one fundamental misunderstanding. Both believed strength could be converted directly into rule. But rule is not a single victory. Rule is order repeated every day. Grain today, taxes tomorrow, troops the day after. Each step is boring. But empire survives on boring things. Xiang Yu did not love these things. Lu Bu did not understand them. But men like Liu Bang and Cao Cao used them. That is why Xiang Yu could become the hegemon king. But not the beginning of an empire. He stood very high, but beneath him there was no structure that could outlive him. And that is why Lu Bu could become the greatest warrior under heaven, but not a stable ruler. His existence was like a blade planted in the earth, sharp, brilliant, but unable to grow roots. An empire needs roots: land, grain, law, people who keep records, people who guard gates, people who believe in tomorrow. Xiang Yu had legend. Lu Bu had fear. But legend and fear are not institutions. So they could make people remember, but they could not make people keep obeying. A true ruler does not merely win awe, he wins habit. Habit is the deepest weapon of empire. Xiang Yu and Lu Bu were too much like lightning. They lit the sky, but they could not become the sun. Their strength was too concentrated, too personal, too impossible to replicate. The power of a system is precisely this. It does not need genius to appear every day. That is why war creates power, but only systems preserve it. Xiang Yu did not preserve power. Lu Bu did not either. What they had was only the brightest moment when power appeared. So history gave them the same verdict. You may become a legend, but legend cannot replace a state. Next, we stop asking who was stronger and begin asking who could survive inside history's rules. Now, we can return to the most dangerous question. If Xiang Yu and Lu Bu were placed on the same scale of history, who was stronger? If we judge only personal combat power, both men approached legend, but their strength was not the same kind of strength. Xiang Yu's strength was the strength to break armies. He was like a moving disaster. Wherever he appeared, formation began to collapse. Lu Bu's strength was the strength to make war pause. He did not need to kill everyone. He only needed everyone to believe he could. So if we judge battlefield destructive force, Xiang Yu looks more like a commander and more like war itself. If we judge personal intimidation, Lu Bu looks more like a weapon every faction wanted to use and feared losing control of. But history is not a ranking of violence. History does not only ask who can win a battle. It asks the next question. After you win, can you hold it? If we judge tactics, Xiang Yu still has the advantage. Julu was not mere brutality. It was extreme psychological warfare. He transformed fear from fear of death into no choice but forward. It was cruel, but it worked. Liu Bu's tactics were more about instant judgment. He could create local shock, but rarely turned shock into long-term strategy. So tactically, Xiang Yu was more complete. Liu Bu was sharper. But sharpness is not completeness. But what made both men fail was not tactics, not courage, not even luck. The real dividing line was politics, systems, whether they could make others bet their future on them. Xiang Yu could not do it, because the future he offered looked too much like the past. Liu Bu could not do it, because he offered almost no future. He offered only himself. This is why Liu Bang could be weak. Cao Cao could be defeated, but they were not easy to erase completely. But Xiang Yu and Liu Bu, once they fell, their worlds fell with them. Not because they were not great, but because they were too irreplaceable. The terrifying thing about mature power is not that its leader cannot fall. It is that after the leader falls, it keeps running. So we can offer the first answer: combat power. Xiang Yu stood closer to the extreme form of war. Second answer: tactical completeness. Xiang Yu still stands higher, because he could turn desperation into a weapon. Third answer: personal intimidation. Liu Bu can stand beside Xiang Yu, in certain moments, perhaps even more purely. But the fourth answer: political ability. Both failed, only in different ways. Xiang Yu's political failure was misreading the future. Liu Bu's political failure was having no future at all. Fifth answer: system capacity. This is not about who was worse. It means both men were unfit for the new rules. History does not choose the strongest man. It chooses the man who adapts best to the rules. In the late Qin world, the rules shifted from aristocratic warfare to centralized imperial war. Xiang Yu did not adapt. In the late Han world, the rules shifted from individual valor to organized war. Liu Bu did not adapt. So their shared trait was not failure, it was displacement. They fit the old battlefield too well, and the new world not enough. Had Xiang Yu been born earlier, he might have been the perfect hero of the old aristocratic world. Had Liu Bu been born earlier, perhaps he would have become the most feared warrior of the frontier legends. But they were not born earlier. They were born in the cracks between changing rules, and cracks swallow heroes first. That is why the stronger they were, the more tragic they became. Their strength made change harder. Ordinary men compromise. The weak learn. But men at the peak most easily believe they do not need to change. So they were not simply failures. They were the last victors of the old rules, and the first sacrifices of the new ones. If you ask, who was stronger? The answer may be Xiang Yu. If you ask, who was better suited to build a state? The answer is neither. If you ask why their endings were so similar, there is only one answer. Neither understood what history truly rewards. History does not reward the strongest man. It rewards the man who can live inside the rules. And Xiang Yu and Liu Bu believed in themselves more than they believed in the age. The curse of the war god was not that they were too weak. It was that they believed too deeply in strength. Both believed that if power was great enough, the world would eventually bend. But history is never only the battlefield. History is confidence, supplies, roads, alliances, rules. Strength can break a gate, but it cannot make the people behind it open that gate every morning. Strength can seize a granary, but it cannot make farmers plant again next year. Strength can force people to bow, but it cannot make them entrust you with their future. Xiang Yu was not defeated by Liu Bang alone. He was defeated by the web behind Liu Bang. Liu Bu was not defeated by Cao Cao alone. He was defeated by the order behind Cao Cao. Both made their enemies afraid, but neither made the world feel safe. That is the cruelest part. A man can be so strong that no one dares fight him, and still, no one truly follows him. On the banks of the Wu River, Xiang Yu finally saw it. He still had strength, but he had lost the world. He could still kill dozens, perhaps hundreds, but it would no longer change the ending, because history no longer needed a Xiang Yu who could still kill. It needed a realm that could keep running. At Baimen Gate, Liu Bu finally understood. His strength could no longer buy trust. He could say he was still useful, still able to fight, still able to kill for a new master. But he forgot. A weapon too sharp frightens even the hand that holds it. Liu Bei's words were not merely a warning. They were a summary of Liu Bu's entire life. A man who once killed his protectors will struggle to convince the next protector that he will be different. So Liu Bu did not die because he had no value. He died because his value was too dangerous. Xiang Yu chose death. Liu Bu begged for life. One looked like a hero, the other like a prisoner. But deeper down, they died from the same thing. Both believed that strength itself could solve everything. But strength can only win a moment. Systems win time. Strength can win wars, but it cannot defeat structure. It cannot defeat systems. It cannot defeat the future. That is why the strongest men sometimes die the most powerless deaths. Because they could control enemies, but they could not control the age itself. Xiang Yu at the Wu River, Liu Bu at Baimen Gate. They were not defeated by their enemies. They were defeated by the era they could not understand. What they left behind was not an empire. It was a warning. When a man treats power as the answer, history often turns him into the question. They once looked like war itself, but in the end, even war could not save them.